Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Infrastructure and Investment Scrutiny Board of the municipal year. Very exciting. And particularly warm welcome to newly elected members and also our new exec member as well. Everyone will introduce themselves in the meeting, so I'm not going to name names now. My name is Isaac Wilson. I am chairing today's meeting. Just to remind everybody attending that the meeting is webcast and the link to view the recording will be on the meeting webpage. For any members of the public who are watching, hello and welcome. I will in a moment ask all the members to introduce themselves so you know who we all are. Just a reminder to everybody as well, please mute your microphone when you're finished speaking. Starting on my left, please.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Asghar Ali, representing Gifton and Hare Hills.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Lisa Martin for Round Hay Ward.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Katie Dye, Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward.
Good morning, Emma Camillo-Price, Senior Intelligence and Policy Officer.
Good morning, Angela Barnacle, Director of City Development.
Good morning, Councillor Peter Carlill, Exec Member for Transport and Planning.
Good morning, Gary Bartlett, Chief Officer for Highways and Transportation.
Morning, Mark Mills, Chief Officer for Asset Management and Regeneration.
Morning, everyone. Adam Harvack, Group Manager for Policy and Plans and Strategic Planning.
Good morning, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management in Planning.
Good morning, Councillor Joe Ingham of Kirkstall Ward.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Clancy Walker for Armley.
Good morning, Councillor Neil Buckley, Woodley Ward.
Becky Atherton, Scrutiny Advisor to the Board.
Thank you, everybody. So nice to have you. Before we get started on the agenda, I just wanted to also mention that last year this board was chaired by Councillor Hannah Biffle, and lots of what we're looking at is possible because of her really good work. And this board did some really useful and interesting work last year. So I just wanted to, before we get started, add to the minutes a note of thanks from myself as chair, and I'm sure from the board as well for her hard work last year. Brilliant. So just to get started, Becky, could I invite you to run through agenda items 1 to 6, please?
Thank you, Chair. Item 1, we've no appeals today. Item 2, we've no items that are excluded from the public domain. Item 3, there are no late items of business. Item 4, can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct? Take silence as none. Item 5, we've not received any apologies as yet, but I'm conscious we may well receive apologies from Councillor Jagger, who's yet to join us this morning. And then item 6 is the minutes of the last meeting of the former Infrastructure and Investment and Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board, and we're seeking confirmation that the minutes are an accurate record of that meeting.
Thank you. Could I seek a proposer and a seconder from returning members? So I've got Councillor Asghar to propose and Councillor Dye to second. Thank you. Fine. Item number 7. We have the terms of reference item for the board. So this report sets out the board's terms of reference as agreed by the council at the AGM in May. Becky, would you just highlight the key information, please, because there are some changes this year.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, this is one of the annual reports that's taken to each of the 7 scrutiny boards. Key areas for members to just observe. Appendix 1 on page 15 includes your general terms of reference that are applicable to all scrutiny boards. Page 17 is Appendix 2, which includes Article 6 of the Constitution that outlines the Scrutiny Board remits and any special responsibilities the board may have. For example, in the case of this board, there's a special responsibility in relation to flood risk management. On page 25, Appendix 3 sets out the alignment of the 7 scrutiny boards with the officer delegated functions and executive portfolios for this municipal year, and the breakdown for this scrutiny board is on page 28. Members are just asked to note this report for information.
Great. Are we happy to note that report? Does anyone have any questions on that? Lovely. In that case, I think we're happy to note that report. So moving on to item number 8, this is in relation to co-opted members. So currently we do not have any co-opted members for this board. There are provisions within the Constitution for the appointment of co-opted members, should we wish to do so. We have discussed this a little in the pre-meeting already, but Beck, if you could just highlight the key information as a matter of record, please.
Again, Chair, this is one of the annual meetings that's taken to all 7 scrutiny boards. As the Chair has said, the Constitution does make provision for any scrutiny board to co-opt members to their board. It's important to note that for this board, there are no legislative requirements for this board to co-opt external representatives, and my recommendation would be that you bring in external witnesses for relevant items rather than seeking to co-opt on a permanent basis. Although obviously it's for members to determine if you wanted to change that approach as the year goes on.
Yeah, thank you. We have had that discussion. So does anyone have any questions or comments on that at all? No, are we happy to note that? Yeah, brilliant, lovely, thank you. Okay, so moving on to item number 9, which is the sources of work and excitingly the work programme, which is a draft of how we're going to spend our year together. So if you could just provide the kind of, again, I'm sort of Becky's, thank you.
Hi, Chair. Yeah, this item provides guidance about potential sources of work for the Scrutiny Board and asks members to consider the draft work programme. The items that are currently included are known items of business, so your budget consultation, your performance monitoring, items that have been referred to the Scrutiny Board, the 2 items on the agenda today included. And it also includes member recommendations to date. It's a live document that will be brought to each of your meetings for future comment.
Thank you. And I would also add that I'm happy to chat any time to board members about the work programme in person or by email or phone or whatever. It's really important that we shape this together as a board. And later on today, in a moment, in fact, we're looking at the performance report, which looks at key metrics about how the services we look at are doing. And that can be a really useful guide to what we should then look at as a board this year. Does anyone have any questions or anything they would like to add to the work programme or discuss that's on the work programme already? Councillor Martin.
Yes, first of all, I was talking at the pre-meeting about sewerage in our rivers and streams across Leeds, and I know that we've got flood alleviation in, so I would also like something in there about about the prevention of the contamination of our rivers and bringing Yorkshire Water in to be held to account. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really good idea, and we should look at how best to look at that as a board and raise it more in the item later on. Any other questions or additions for work programme from anybody? Okay. Oh, yes, please.
Just on the housing item, sorry. Just something in there. I know we're looking at housing and the phasing of our housing, but I wondered if we could look at opportunities and in the light of recent announcements about expansion of house building across our cities in the country, and whether we can how we can in Leeds take advantage of this, because I think we're one of the leaders in this field, but also how we can use that to help other authorities learn from our lessons.
Thank you. Yes, we will have an item on council house growth late in October, and Mark is here with us today, and will be helping us on that item. So if you could note Councillor Martin's comments there, and think about that for our discussion in October, I think that'd be really, really useful. The Leeds model of council housing is what we're looking at. Okay. Any other questions or comments on the work programme? I'll just make a couple of quick notes. So I would like to propose that we have a look at planning enforcement as a board through a member working group. I would just like to see, first of all, if any members have got any questions or thoughts on that. We can discuss it more, but does anyone have a particular interest in planning enforcement or anything they'd like to raise on that topic?
Well, only to say I think it's a pertinent issue across all our wards, and I would definitely support it.
Also, just please note there's another working group proposed in the work programme, which is around neighbourhood planning, which the idea of which is to bring together all of the ways we do neighbourhood planning as a council, have a look at it, and see how we could do it better, and how we can better support neighbourhood plans specifically, which are a really important way for the community to shape what development and planning looks like in their area. So that is worth noting. Again, if people have thoughts on those, questions about those, or want to have a chat about it outside of a meeting, that would be very welcome as well. Okay, so could we just note the draft work programme, please? We all happy with that as it stands? Lovely. And Becky will note further items for it as they arise in our conversation. Right, moving on to agenda item number 10. We're making quick progress. So the performance report, we get a summary of performance against priorities relevant to our scrutiny board. And it's part of our responsibility to review that and receive that and review that twice a year. So it gives us an opportunity to offer some challenge, but also really to think about where we might need more attention as a scrutiny board, as I said before. And gives you a good idea, frankly, of what our board looks at. So just for awareness, I've already asked officers to consider whether there are some additional KPIs that we could include, particularly in relation to planning enforcement and highways maintenance. But members are always welcome to make further suggestions on that note, and we can discuss them. Brilliant. In that case, I will just ask that we, if Angela would like to start with any general introductory comments on the performance report.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Emma's going to provide an overview of the report first, if that's okay.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Chair. So I will just quickly run through the key updates to our metrics in this report, and then open up for questions. So the specific points that we've included this time, and this is for the Q4 year end 25-26 performance detail. So new homes first. The number of newly built and converted homes at the end of 25-26 stands at 4,390. Slightly lower figure than the number recorded for the previous year, but above the local housing need target, which is 3,000.
So sorry, it's a little bit hard to hear back here. Would you perhaps pull your mic a little bit closer to you? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see if that's a little better. So just on new homes then, reporting that the figure of 4,390 is slightly lower than the previous year, but above the local housing need target of 3,898. On affordable homes, I didn't have the Q4 update for inclusion when the report itself was drafted, but I have now got the final year-end figure, and that stands at 943 for 25-26, which is quite significantly above the 559 reported for the previous year.
Residential developments built to required, accessible and adaptable standards. The results on this one can vary depending on the types and timing of schemes, but overall, since performance has been started to be monitored a few years ago, performance has remained strong on this one. The killed and seriously injured figures we are reporting for the year ending March 2026 across all road users, there were 452 people killed or seriously injured in Leeds, slightly less than the previous year's total of 456. Satisfaction with a range of transport services, and these figures are taken from the annual West Yorkshire Residents' Perceptions of Transport survey. The last time the survey was conducted was during January to March 25, and that was for the 24-25 period. We don't have an update on this one yet. And overall satisfaction scores were slightly up on both bus travel and rail travel. And finally, we have the percentage of planning applications determined on time. And performance across all application types consistently exceeds the government's statutory timescales and designation thresholds, and any fluctuations we see on this are entirely within the normal performance pattern. So those were the main points I wanted to raise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Do any other officers or Councillor Carlisle wish to make any introductory comments at all?
Welcome any questions from members on these. There's some fantastic points in here. I was very happy to be at some of the council houses in Hufftop recently, which at that date we went to over 1,000 council homes delivered as part of that programme. So that was a fantastic achievement that's noted in some of these figures. But there's a lot of positives in here, but welcome any ideas from members on where they'd like us to see further, maybe where they'd like us to see further information throughout the year.
Thank you, Councillor Carlisle. On the new houses at Hufftop, perhaps if members of the board are interested to have a look as well, we could arrange something along those lines. Right, just to say to members, if you've got any questions or comments, please just raise your hand and I'll nod at you when I've noted it. I've got an indication from Councillor Martin to speak.
Yes, thank you. And it's great to hear about the council house building programme. And I know that we're a leader in the country, but I just want to know, would it be helpful for this board to know how many we're losing through the enforcement of right to buy in this city?
I think that might be a question for Becky, because what I do know is I have an overview of the amount of houses we procure and build as part of the council housing growth programme. I'm not entirely sure if right to buy would come under this and what we're losing, or whether it comes under housing management of after they start. But I appreciate that's a very technical detail. Sorry, Councillor Martin, but it'd be good to get clarity on that.
Well, maybe, I mean, Becca's indicating it does come under the other scrutiny board, housing environment. However, it's obviously relevant to us and would be relevant to our agenda item about council housing growth in October. I wonder if also just at this moment, perhaps Mark could make comment on that, and then Lisa, if you've got any follow-up questions, you can ask.
Thank you. So I've not got the exact figures for right to buys, but obviously we can get hold of those, and I think it is relevant that we bring those to the inquiry in October. I think it's fair to say that we've probably delivered similar numbers of new homes and brought more the similar numbers of affordable homes into the city as we've lost through right to buy over the last 5 years. So we're broadly a net neutral position. Now, obviously, right to buy has been reformed, and that will have an impact, one would assume, moving forward, and particularly the removal of the ability for right to buy to be applied to new properties. That's obviously a big benefit in terms of the change of the approach. But yeah, it has had a big impact, and I think it's fair to say that the number of right to buy applications peaked as a result of the change in the approach, which was inevitable because obviously the people were using that as the last opportunity under the old regime for discounts, etc. but we can bring that detail back in October.
Thank you. That would be really useful, because I find it heartbreaking that we're just running to stand still with house building in Leeds. So it would be good to see us actually having some net gain for all of our efforts. Thank you.
Presumably, if we're building more than other places and we're only neutral, then other authorities have a net loss. Yeah. I have indications from Councillor Dye and then Buckley.
Thank you. So my question is about the KSI data, and it's specifically about the reference in the report to introduction of new safety cameras, both average speed and red light violation. Wondering if there's any data that says that these are actually making our roads safer at the places where they've been put in.
Certainly, there's lots of data, and just talking generally, absolutely, yes, they are having a positive impact. They're probably one of the most impactful, most positive items that we deploy on the highway that has that positive impact. But if there are particular sections that members would like to see, we have that data and can provide it.
Yep, follow up.
Thank you. Yeah, because it's something that we have discussed before at this board, and the expansion across the city. I think this board has largely welcomed. So I think it'd be great for us to be able to see that.
Yeah, if we could note that would be really helpful. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. It was really in connection with Councillor Martin's question about council house building. I come from a different perspective than she does. You won't be surprised to hear. However, I would like to know, if possible, given that the discounts were reduced and therefore there was a massive increase in applications, what the figures normally were year to year on council house sales and what they've gone up to following the reduction in the discounts, please.
Okay, so that would be something that Housing Leeds would need to respond to. So something that we can pick up outside of this meeting.
I'm happy. Are you happy for that to be picked up outside the meeting?
Yeah.
We'll chase that because we do have that item in October, so I think it is useful information for us to have. Any follow up on that, Councillor Buckley, or any further? I have an indication from Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Chair. Gary, on the safety cameras, I mean, they're used for red light violations, also for variable speeds and stuff, where has been fatalities. At some sites, there are no cameras installed, so the whole dynamics of that road is changed or is in the process of being changed. So why there is a two-tier process where some sites are then put into cameras or cameras are put on traffic lights where there are violations or on a stretch of road. I mean, I live in a ward in Chapel Allerton ward, so Scotland Road, there's cameras put on now where there was a loss of life, okay? But there are other wards where the introduction of cameras hasn't gone into place, even though we know that these are hotspots, yet we're asking for a total road infrastructure change. Why that?
There's a lot in that one, Councillor. Many years ago, local authorities, some local authorities put cameras at many junctions and throughout their areas, and they became regarded by the general public as a cash cow. And there was a public reaction to that, which prompted a reaction from the Department for Transport, which changed the criteria for speed cameras, and the criteria became much tighter and more restrictive. Now, in recent years, as we've explained in previous scrutiny committee meetings here, we have led the charge to actually relax that criteria a bit more, and particularly where there are community concerns around speeding. We have a process now where residents, councillors are able to highlight those concerns, and working with the police, we will consider the request for appropriate enforcement. That might be a camera, but it might be a visit by a camera team in terms of mobile enforcement rather than a fixed site. So that, putting the story short somewhat, we apply a very objective, factual analysis to all the requests that come into when it comes to speed cameras, be they fixed, mobile, or average speed cameras. But as already been alluded to, we have a very flexible approach, which is having very positive impacts on road safety and seeing some of our numbers come down, which is in marked contrast to other authorities across West Yorkshire and indeed nationally. So that more flexible use of the criteria is having benefits, but we will not see the day when every traffic signal, every length of road will be covered by traffic camera enforcement. That's unrealistic. It might take us towards where the country was 20, 30 years ago with camera enforcement. We won't want to do that. The bottom line here is, under Vision Zero strategy, is try to get everybody to change their behaviour, make sure that they abide by the laws of the highway, allow more time for their journeys, and just be courteous to everybody on the highway. So rather a lengthy answer, but quite a complex question and a lot in it. Hopefully that covers the ground. Thank you.
Any other members wish to ask questions or raise comments? Councillor Moore.
Just going back in relation to affordable housing, if that's okay to go back. Yeah, I recently visited the new Wesley Road affordable housing scheme in Armley. I think it's a good example. It demonstrates it's possible to deliver affordable homes on brownfield sites whilst maintaining mature trees, biodiversity, and the high environmental standards. It's not a sales pitch, but I was genuinely impressed with the attention to all of those key objectives. And so I guess my question is, how's the local plan going to encourage more developments like that one?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think it's always good to see really good examples, and I think that helps to kind of raise the standards of what is possible. And I think we have to recognise that there are some challenges in terms of viability. We're hearing that across different kinds of sites in different parts of the city, but often these challenges don't have a pound sign attached to them. It's more about how we design sites and do it early as possible. And I think through the work in the local plan, and I think in particular the design code work that is happening in the strategic planning service, which will kind of come alongside the local plan, will hope to set high, ambitious, but realistic and deliverable standards that will hope to see kind of schemes a lot more consistently across the city. Because as I say, I think it's more about understanding the challenges that a site presents and designing that into the scheme that is the real solution there, rather than seeing it just as a pound problem, which clearly some mitigation may require a financial hit on development, but largely a lot of these things can be designed from the beginning. So I think with clear instruction to developments through the local plan, through a design code, but also just making best use of our existing design guidance at a national level as well, we're really confident that hopefully we can see more of those kind of schemes happening.
Yeah, and I think it was particularly noticeable because it was a couple of weeks ago, it was 32 degrees on a Friday. Yes, it was 32 degrees one Friday afternoon, and it's a 10-minute walk from where I live in an end terrace 120-year-old house, and the climate resilience as well of these homes, how noticeably cooler it was inside those homes compared to mine. So I think that's something that we really need to be giving consideration to, not just from an energy conservation perspective. Yes, sorry. Hopefully you caught the end of that. But I think it's not just from an energy conservation perspective, but just from how families are going to adapt to our ever-changing climate.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think there's, at a national level, the Future Home Standard was released earlier in the year alongside a kind of future building standard, which we yet to see how that plays out in obviously new developments, because these things take time to kind of flow through. We also anticipate that there'll be a new national planning policy framework, potentially even this week, certainly soon will be coming out, which will again sort of establish how far local authorities can go in setting those kind of standards. I think through previous work in the local plan, we're really keen to push those policies as far as we can, in a context of deliverability, obviously. And yeah, I think there is a challenge here, because we're obviously, some of the stats that are in this report show, I think 57% of new housing that we built last year was in the city centre. We know the effects of urban heat island effects. These places are quite significantly warmer than surrounding areas. And it really makes the importance of not just how we build those homes, but things like, say, dual aspect to make sure you can open a window to get a breeze going through, but how you accommodate things like trees to create that kind of cooling. There's lots of kind of tips and tricks, aren't there? And it comes down to a lot of excellent design colleagues who are looking at those kind of issues when they're looking at schemes, and excellent development management colleagues who are really reviewing not just the principle of development, but the real details of what it's like to live in these spaces. So yeah, I can only say I completely agree, and we'll try to make sure, I think, through local plan policies and existing policies, that we're really mindful of the impacts of the people who live in these spaces and what it's like there for them.
I think Councillor Carlo wants to come in on that as well.
I'm just going to come briefly in on that scheme. We overlapped slightly. I had to leave early, and I think you were there slightly later, so sorry. I wasn't running off just because you turned up. I had kids to take to a climbing lesson. What's just interesting about that scheme, obviously we talked about our council housing growth and how we're just at that cusp where we're only just keeping up with demand, but that one was one that was part of our affordable housing partnership, so delivered by a social housing provider, and we were able to put a bit of funding in that in order to make sure it was viable, and it was fantastic to see that on the scene there. So that there are those ones as well, maximising the amount of affordable housing growth. And completely right, we'll come on to it later, but if people want to make comments around the climate impact of new homes, then there is the consultation that's open on the local plan, and they can add that in as their thoughts. It will be considered obviously in a really key area of it, as we wanted it to be some time ago, and we wanted probably to go further than the government would allow us at that time to go in those particular measures, but people can have their say on that with our council houses as well. From the other side of it, we're completely of the view that there's no point us building a house that somebody then in the winter cannot afford to live in. So there's a really important point there, that it would be silly for us to build a house for somebody who we know is struggling, who we then build huge bills into it. So there's that impact that we're really key on.
Thank you. Quick follow-up.
I know where we talked about inviting representatives from different companies. I'm not just saying just that particular one, but I think it would be nice to hear from a smaller developer with some of the clever ideas. One of the ideas which I'm hoping to visit actually in a couple of weeks, when I'm heading up there with some family in the northeast in Seaham, where they're drawing hot water up from a disused mine to power homes, and just some very clever ideas that they're adapting. So Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's really useful. And we're lucky also to have the chair of the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee, CEAC, on our board, and Councillor Dye, and we've already discussed collaboration between this board and CEAC. So I think your comments are useful, and I think we should bear in mind for the local plan item that we have, let's make sure we look at the design guidelines and things that are part of that, and climate resilience. And similarly, I think there's probably a conversation to be had around council house growth, the balance of, kind of how we provide lots of council houses that are also of a high quality and livable and so on. So I'd really like us to bring those items into our conversation. So thank you. I can see people busily taking notes. Yeah, please do consider those for those items, and we'll reflect that in the minutes as well. Thank you, Becky. So I have an indication from Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask some questions about the e-bike hire scheme. Page 82. It says in the report here, a package of improvements was delivered which improved existing bikes and saw the introduction of a new bike in April 25. Does this refer to the vandalism situation where we had to put in £1.3 million extra into the scheme? That's my first question. The second question is the overall scheme making a profit now? And are you aware of any accidents which might have happened with these e-bikes? And has there been a problem with dumped bikes, please?
Okay, thank you. Again, quite a few questions in there. It was partly in response to antisocial behaviour. We've replaced the bikes, new range of bikes came in, which were certainly more secure in terms of the battery pack, and that has been successful. And we have seen a reduction on those newer bikes in terms of the anti-social behaviour, which is encouraging. In terms of profit, I think we probably have to give you an update or privately and confidentially on that. Do that outside if that's okay. I am not aware of any KSIs or any other collisions involving specifically the Beryl bikes. There may be some, but they probably won't be flagged up within the statistics that the police record. So I think, but the company would tell colleagues, I'm sure, and I'm not aware that that's been reported into the system. In terms of dump bikes, there are certainly, I've seen reports on the docks. There's a geofencing process where ideally you should dock in the docking station, but if you leave the bike within the immediate environs of the docking station, which is geofenced, that's okay as well, and you won't be fined for that. And there's been some examples of that occurring, which I agree looks untidy and a mess. Obviously, where there has been anti-social behaviour and bikes have been taken, they will have been dumped in various places. There is a team from Beryl that go round and collect bikes once they're reported to them, and I would encourage people to acquire the telephone number and the contact details and help assist in terms of recovering those dumped bikes or reporting any suspicious behaviour. I think the point to make here is that the number of trips on the e-scooters and the e-bikes of our scheme are encouraging. They are above 2 per, I'll call it, vehicle, which is encouraging and compares favourably with other cities where these schemes are. And certainly on my travels to and from park and ride site bus stops to Merrion House, almost every day I see a number of people using the e-bikes and e-scooters. They are clearly a benefit to members of our community, and it's a great shame that any antisocial behaviour reduces their availability to people that they are particularly popular, obviously particularly in this weather at the moment.
Do you have follow-up questions on that?
Well, just to say, I appreciate the offer of a private briefing on the profitability. That could be by email, presumably, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be useful. Thank you. Yeah, I see a yes indication. Any other members of the board wish to speak? I have a couple of questions myself. On the KSI figures, page 79, yeah, you've already indicated that the key driver of the lower numbers has been around safety cameras. But you have also listed lots of other really good work that you're doing, which I guess it's very hard to show that they specifically reduce KSIs or the impact they have. So I know we'll have more of a conversation on this later in the year, but how do you, aside from the KSI figures, which are probably quite hard to demonstrate a connection between the work you do and those, how else do you judge the performance of your activities around Vision Zero and road safety? So are there other metrics you use that give you a better sense of how things are going kind of month to month or year to year?
Yeah, maybe that is one for more in-depth conversation in the September meeting, if that would be okay. In some instances, it's very difficult to show a link between some of our work and the figures. It's just been through experience and many years working in this field, the agencies come up with these, what it used to be the 3 E's. So obviously educating as many people as possible, particularly youngsters, children at school. We invest a lot in that, but to actually show how that then flows through into KSI figures in future years is very difficult. Engineering, we've talked about, there is we can measure that very clearly by looking at where we've installed, for example, average speed cameras on the outer ring road, what the situation was before and what it is now, and it's very clear. Engineering works too. When we introduce a scheme, we can show before and afters. That's very clear too. But a lot of Vision Zero is going to be inevitably about behavioural change and about getting people to change their mindset once they get onto the highway, be they walking, cycling, but particularly in a car. Car these days is a very heavy, very swift vehicle, which can cause a lot of trouble if it's not used carefully and considerately. And so often, unfortunately, we see so many fatal reports or serious reports where a moment of madness, trying to do something too quick in a rush, results in serious consequences, sometimes not for the driver, but for third parties. But I can certainly pick that up, Chair, with colleagues and see if we can answer that better in the fuller session later in September.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I think this is leading nicely into that session. I'd also be interested in the vehicles involved in KSIs as well across the year, not for this session, but for that one. You know, are we mostly talking about private motor vehicles, bikes, lorries, etc.? I think that's really useful context for that conversation. On the page 86, in regards to planning applications, the metric is around planning applications dealt with on time, determined on time. Does that include where we've asked the client to accept a voluntary extension in the deadline for dealing with a planning application?
Yes, Chair, that does include the extension of time facility that is available to applicants and us to agree, so that actually in quite a number of cases that is certainly for major applications that tends to be the norm, because a period of 13 weeks to deal with a major application is quite limited in terms of achieving an appropriate scheme and then agreeing a Section 106 legal agreement, which can take several months, if not longer, to agree by the time all of the relevant parties have signed up to that agreement. So yes, it does include those extensions of time.
I guess my follow-up on that would be just around, do you categorize planning applications internally, so major, medium-sized, minor, and so on? And I'm sure you don't have the data to hand, but I would be very interested to know how many, I guess, minor planning applications require an extension in time, because I think that is pertinent to how the customer service feels to be people making the planning applications. And I would guess that your average person applying for planning, if asked for more time from a council, would agree to it. But nonetheless, it's desirable for us to deal with planning applications as quickly as possible. So do you have any information on that to hand, or?
I don't have that to hand, Chair, but we do actually report that to all members as part of the annual performance report, which we circulate to members of plans panels, and probably all members actually later in the year. That should be coming forward in the next month or so, and that does include those details about what percentage were a result of extension of time beyond the normal within time category. But as you say, for householder applications which fall under the other category, the number of extensions of time is quite small compared to major applications. It's only a small fraction, because we tend to deal with the vast majority within the 8-week period that's given as the statutory target.
Thank you. That's helpful. I'll note the annual performance report, and maybe we can pick it up when the performance report comes to the scrutiny board later in the year. Any other questions or comments from members? I've got Councillor Buckley.
Just a very brief question, actually, which may be covered when we go into it in more detail in due course. But on page 84, on the bus situation, I just wondered whether the bus fare cap is working, given the flatlining patronage figures.
I can come in on that, I guess. When we went through that, and I think you were probably on Transport Committee at the same time, was really hard throughout the last 6 years or so of all the change that we've had to attribute exactly where passenger growth or decline was going from. What we did see in many areas was, passenger usage has continued to decline, and in our area it's been no different, but there have been marked changes among some different audiences. So I think we had attributed at first, and I'm trying to remember the report that came, that maybe 4% of people were using the bus more because of that. Sorry, there are 4% more journeys of people using the bus because of that specific bus fare cap that we had in there. It's really difficult to associate where those would have come from and what the decline is, because it's changed obviously so much since 2019 when we had a baseline of figures. But it's a really useful question, because there always was that balance that you try and sit at WICA, and that'll be the same balance when they're setting the fares for the Weaver network. How much do you invest in fares and how much do you invest in network? The more expensive the fare, the more buses you can afford. However, you may have fewer people on them if you get that balance wrong. So it's setting that level. It's really good conversation to be having at the moment, especially given in our area, people make a lot shorter journeys perhaps than they do in others. You know, if you're going from Headingley to the city centre, you don't want to pay the same amount necessarily as somebody coming from Huddersfield to Leeds, for instance, every day. So how that'll be attributed in the new fares, we don't know, but that's for the Weaver board at WICA to work out and agree.
Okay, any more questions or comments on this item, please? If not, I invite Councillor Carlisle to make any closing remarks if he would like to.
Sorry, I just took a bite of my flapjack at that time. Apologies, Chair. No, thank you, members, for those questions of things that you'd like us to look into more deeply. I know there's a number of them on the working plan anyway, but we really do appreciate members' comments and questions to try and pull out some of those figures. We'll get something on the Beryl bike, so I sent out to all members, I think, as a briefing note, if we can. Gary, I think that would be useful. And then obviously we've got that Full Vision Zero one in September, which will be a really good way to look in depth at one of the biggest things that we do really in the Highways and Transport Service of trying to reduce the number of people killed and seriously injured on our roads. There's major schemes that we go into, we pick them up where we see hotspots. But as you say, Councillor Ali, there's only so much work we can do, and we're still having to pick specific areas to introduce schemes. And there are some we just won't have got to yet. You know, we had in the first average speed cameras in West Yorkshire not very long ago, and now we can continue to roll those out to places. But the last thing I'll say to ward members on that is, and to members of the public as well, if there are areas you would like to see speed enforcement, that mobile speed enforcement by the police when they visit with the van is available to be requested. Highways officers can do an assessment that shows whether that can be supported in a particular location, and then the police will visit several times. I've raised a number of areas in my area, and I know there will be many across the city, where then you get multiple visits by that speed van. Does help deter speeding because people get used to seeing it around, and it does send out, I mean, there's many of ours that we've had thousands of people that have been speeding in particular locations, and that will have a positive impact on those killed and seriously injured. You can also, Gary's reminding me, sign the Vision Zero pledge online if you so wish, as members and members of the public as well. I think many of you will have already before council meetings when we've had that there, but for new members, that's something we'd really welcome you to sign up to.
Thank you for those remarks, Councillor Carlisle. We made note already of some of the issues and highlighted those, so I think we've got those. So are members happy just to note the recommendation and move on to the next item? Lovely, thank you very much. In that case, oh yeah, we're just swapping rounds. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to item number 11, which is the draft Leeds flood risk management strategy, which I think there's a lot of interest in. We've already had some conversation around this in the pre-meeting. We're really looking forward to your presentation. We, as a scrutiny board, need to consider this at the request of the exec board. So this is a really important item for us. To begin with, we have officers who are going to deliver a brief presentation, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone.
Actually, if you could just bear, we're just getting the presentation up.
Okay.
We've got a. I don't want to do too much of a spoiler alert, but I think we have a brief video in this presentation, so just a little bit more technical setup. And just to say, thanks for joining us. And when you speak, if you could pull the mic a little bit closer to you, because it can be a little bit hard to hear sometimes. Okay, please continue. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Garford. I'm a Principal Engineer in the Flood and Climate Resilience Management team. Today, I'll be talking to you about the update to the local flood risk management strategy and explaining a little about the work of the Flood and Climate Resilience Management Department as a whole. FCRM, for short, is made up of 4 teams, totaling 44 staff, with asset management being divided into 4 sub-teams. Slide, please, Becky. Climate Strategy and Innovation is the new team that I'm leading on. The key areas of our work include supporting the wider highways and transportation to ensure that sustainability is at the heart of all the works we do. A climate resilient Leeds is a city that will thrive both in times of increased flood risk, drought and heat waves too. To assist with this, we are currently updating the local flood risk management strategy. The existing strategy was adopted at full council in March 2019, and it is a requirement of the Flood and Water Management Act that the document is updated periodically, approximately every 6 years. The draft, starting on page 95 of your papers, is what we're seeking your comments on. The update will do the same as previous strategies by outlining how LCC will manage flooding now and in the future. However, the difference is the greater emphasis on climate resilience and making sure it is fully aligned with the Leeds ambitions. The Air Resilience Company is a great example of how we are doing things differently. And I'll now show you the 2-minute video, please.
The Air Resilience Company has a vision of Leeds and the land around it working together to help our city thrive into the future. To make this a reality, there are serious challenges to overcome. Climate change will drastically increase the risk of flooding, bringing wetter winters, hotter summers and more intense and frequent storms. There is a risk of floods like those seen in 2015, which cost Leeds and the surrounding area more than £500 million, bringing misery to more than 3,000 homes and businesses. Our city's flood defences are world class, but we need to act now to ensure they remain effective for a long time to come. ARC is spearheading the work to harness nature and protect against severe flood risk across the Aire Valley by working with Leeds businesses, farmers and landowners. To safeguard our city, we are enriching the land around it through natural processes, strengthening the soil and establishing hundreds of hedgerows, meadows and trees. By making these improvements, more water can be soaked up before it reaches Leeds, not to mention creating new wildlife habitats, improving water quality and absorbing carbon dioxide to combat climate change. To make this work possible, we have brought together a coalition of businesses and organisations from a huge range of sectors. Each year, these visionary and valued partners contribute funding to ARC's ongoing work, helping us shield the city and regenerate the land which is its lifeblood. Ultimately, ARC is helping safeguard the future of the Aire Valley for people, for nature and for the economy. So please join us and help build a green shield for a prosperous and protected Leeds.
Okay, so moving on to our development control team. They are responsible for assessing planning applications to ensure flood risk has properly been accounted for. Importantly, this includes making sure that flood risk is not increased elsewhere by the proposed development. As the slide states, with about 1,677 planning applications considered each year, this is significantly more than other West Yorkshire authorities. Slide, please. Okay. Our projects and programs team work with professional partners, most notably the Environment Agency, to develop a programme of works to reduce flood risk to communities in Leeds. Once affordable and with the necessary approvals, these projects are then taken forward to construction. As the slide shows, the schemes vary in size and cost, but each is just as important to the community they serve. As the name suggests, the investigations team gather evidence after flood events to help us to understand how future flood risk could be reduced. They also carry out proactive work to reduce flood risk, for example, clearing trash screens before heavy rainfall. 2,898 screens were cleared in 2025. The success of any flood risk asset is dependent on maintenance. The maintenance team maintain 12 flood alleviation schemes and pumping stations to ensure that everything is working when called upon. The FAST team, flood alleviation scheme team, operate and maintain the £200 million Leeds flood alleviation scheme to protect the city from river air flooding. This includes a 24/7 emergency standby rota. Last but not least, the technical systems team assist all the FCRM teams and the wider council with data and evidence to allow informed decisions to be made in all aspects of work. And I'm happy to answer any questions on both the presentation or the emerging draft report, please.
Brilliant, thank you. Much appreciated. I've got a couple of questions myself, but first I'll take any indications from members. So I've got one from Councillor Ali myself already. Any Councillor Dye? Anybody else? No. Okay, so starting with Councillor Ali, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. What stuck out was 2015, and the cost was 500 million. Could we have done anything to prevent this before it happened? The second question about this, what we are doing, is it enough now? How do we know this is heading in the right direction? Those three questions, please.
Thank you, Councillor Ali. So I'm Jonathan Moxon. I'm the Executive Manager for Flood and Climate Resilience Management. I'll take the first question and then Mark might pick up the other two. So the 2015 Boxing Day floods were around a 1 in 200 year flood, so a 0.5% chance of something that big happening in any given year. And there was a lot of flooding in other parts of the country that year as well, and that continued into 2016. I think the short answer is no. At that time, we weren't prepared for something like that. I think what we had done is put ourselves in a really good position by promoting the first phase of Leeds FAS. That was actually on the ground at that time, and it was actually had a big impact on the construction works and flooded parts of the city that had the scheme been completed. Some of that wouldn't have flooded, but lots of parts of the city would have still flooded even if Leeds Fast 1 had been completed at that time. What it did give us a chance to do is really push for a greater level of investment and bring forward Leeds Fast Phase 2. And that, you know, I think many of the cities around the country just don't have that level of investment, but it needed that incident, and that's very unfortunate. But unfortunately, that has been typically how flood investment has been prioritised in this country for many years. And I think we've now put ourselves, I think, in the best position we can. But obviously, as Mark mentioned earlier in the presentation, the maintenance and the operation and the management of the flood schemes that we've put in the city still needs to continue. The Leeds FAS is very innovative, but it's also an active flood scheme. The movable weirs in the city centre are operating all the time. They manage the navigable sort of river levels in the city centre, so that lots of our assets don't just operate when we have flooding. They're actually in operation all the time. And I think that's a key thing to what we've decided to do. So I think we've put ourselves in a very good place, but I think we would have struggled to do more than we did do by 2015. And unfortunately, yeah, the flood was bigger than we were able to cope with, and affected many people in the city and the wider region.
Lovely. I've got Councillor Dye and then Ingham.
Thank you. So I've got two comments and one question. So my first comment generally is about all the work that your team does and all the construction work that's been done, as well as the monitoring. I think it's exceptional. I think a lot of it goes on behind the scenes, and there are probably many people have no idea about the depth of work that goes on, and I think everything makes a big difference. You showed us in your presentation about things that are way upstream of Leeds happening, as well as the city centre fast work, and all the monitoring. I think it's a really impressive piece of work. So that's my first comment. The second comment specifically is about the updated documents. I think it's a very comprehensive document, and I definitely welcome the emphasis on our changing climate and how that will bring a lot of difference in terms of our rainfall. Generally, it's accepted that we are likely to have wetter winters, but I think also we're likely to experience more flash flooding events at this time of the year, you know, as the atmosphere holds more moisture and then throws it back down on us. We've already seen that, haven't we? So my question kind of follows on from that, really, and it's specifically about surface water. So you mentioned in the document a lot of partnership work that's going on, and I think that's really important. So clearly Yorkshire Water is a key partner in that. So what I'm interested in is on a kind of day-to-day basis, can you give specific examples about partnership work between maintenance of sewers and our own kind of highway management that specifically looks towards maybe this time next week when we get a huge deluge and we're in danger of having surface water flooding?
I'll try and answer that one. Thank you for your comments. I'll make sure that the wider team are aware of that, because I agree a lot. If we do good maintenance on flood risk assets, you shouldn't really be able to tell, and so it's difficult for people to see the impact of it, because you shouldn't see an asset in disrepair. It should always be in a good state of repair. So yeah, they'll appreciate those comments. Thank you. The Yorkshire Water do, and as you mentioned earlier, they are a hot topic, and they do come in for a lot of scrutiny. And I think that's right, because it's a really important thing, whether it's water quality and the impact of pollution on rivers, or just the combined management. I think we're doing lots of work behind the scenes with Yorkshire Water at all levels, from the chief exec down to the operational teams that manage the assets all the time. We've set up some sort of different tiers of governance. So we do have a regular meeting at director level with Yorkshire Water to talk about joint strategies and joint priorities, investment programs, and trying to get the best out of the investment that they're putting into the city. They have got a lot of funding earmarked for Leeds in their investment plan. We've started to work with them to help to plan at a strategic level for their next investment plan, their next business plan. So they're engaging with us directly now on, and we had a meeting, actually was just last week, with highways colleagues, regen colleagues, planning colleagues, to influence and plan for their next business plan, which will run from 2030 to 2035. I think a more on the ground role now. We've got our investigations team directly liaising with Yorkshire Water's operational teams. I think we still find it challenging at times. The two organisations don't always fit together that well. There's a spread of responsibilities, and water doesn't really respect the boundaries of whose assets whose, and so therefore we need to do the work to sort of do that integration. If one organisation had all the assets that are part of that system, and from the water coming out of the sky to going out into a river or the sea eventually, then it'd be great, but that's not the case. So it is very complicated, and I think we all recognise that. But I do feel like we're making good progress with Yorkshire Water. I think there's more we'd like to do, and they know that. and I think they're willing to engage with us further. I think we could do more in terms of co-location of staff. I think we could do more in terms of joint work programs, and I think we've got some really good opportunities through things like Leeds South Bank and other sort of priority parts of the city where we've got new housing coming online, different infrastructure projects that will come together. We've got a really good opportunity to work with them strategically, but also sort of operationally around the design and the management of assets, so that when we do get flash flooding, actually we've done what we can to sort of be a bit more preemptive, and it's not just about response and reaction. There's been some good examples in the last few months where we have had regular flooding issues, and we have worked together to sort of put an incident team together to work that through. I don't think it's as slick as it could be, and I think we need to continue to work on that.
Did you have a follow up on that, Councillor Dye?
No, just to say thank you. That's reassuring, and I very much welcome this updated document.
I have a few speakers lined up, so I've got Councillors Ingham, Walker, Ali, and Martin. So, Councillor Ingham, please.
Yeah, just to echo Councillor Dye's comments about, yeah, it's really good what you did, what you've been doing. It's often behind the scenes. I will say in Kirkstall Ward, I have seen, you know, as I've lived there I was living in the ward in 2015, and obviously I've seen the physical improvements along that stretch of the River Aire. So that's just my comment. My question is related to that. What I haven't seen, the stuff further upstream, the natural defences. I just wondered if you could speak to that a bit. Does it obviously there's some tree planting? Does it include wetlands? Is there any like new wetlands being built? Because obviously that's a good flood defence. So yeah, just a bit more information about that.
Thank you. Yes, upstream of Kirkstall, we've got the flood storage area on the project, which is a massive embankment with a control structure in the river channel. From a day-to-day point of view, the predominantly farmland and some of our own land, which is now environmentally enhanced following the scheme, is dry, simply because we need the capacity when required in the large flood events. So that's I wouldn't class it as a wetland as such, but it's being environmentally enhanced. It's a pleasant area where nature's thriving again following construction. There was thousands of trees and shrubs planted in that area and across the scheme as a whole. Working our way further upstream from that point, catchment wide, as the video we saw earlier, we've got the natural flood management, which is linked to the scheme, even though it's badged now as the Air Resilience Company. That's linked to the flood alleviation scheme to reduce the flow of the water into the river prior to getting to Leeds. So the engineer defences are less likely to be overwhelmed in a large flood event. So there has been an emphasis on the elements that you talk about.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. I've got Councillor Walker, then Ali, and then Martin.
Thank you, Chair. More of a comment, observation, I guess, really, than a question, but just following on from the points that Councillor Dye was raising around surface water, and I think a lot of us will recognise that residents don't often distinguish between what's caused the flooding. It's whether it's rivers, drainage, or highways. They just know their street floods. So I think it feels important that our response is similarly joined up. There's not that distinction made. And yeah, just looking at be interested. Obviously, it's my first meeting of this board that I'm here for today, but learning more about retrofitting, where a lot of the houses in Armley, Victorian era, drainage issues. So yes, more of an observation. Thank you.
Do you have any comment you'd like to make on that?
Yeah, just to say very quickly, I think the integration of blue and green infrastructure into highway network, into retrofitting around either our housing stock or public spaces that we manage as a city council, or to try and engage the private sector more heavily in implementing sustainable urban drainage, blue or green infrastructure. We've put that into the new strategy document in a big way. We've also implemented, we've now got a drafted, updated version of our minimum development control standard. So that's the document that sits alongside planning guidance, that's an interpretation of national guidance, but then put into a document that's specific for Leeds. That should hopefully be implemented in the next few weeks. And again, it's got a big emphasis on what can we do both retrospectively, but also through new development to see more blue infrastructure and green infrastructure coming forward in an integrated way. Again, we need to work with Yorkshire Water, and we need to work with other parts of the council as well to sort of make sure that that works for people. There will be benefits around cooling places as part of that. It's not just about water management, but it could have a range of benefits for placemaking, and we think we can do a lot more around that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we'll definitely return to that. But for now, I've got Councillor Ali up next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Something that Councillor Dye and other councillors have talked about is flooding, surface water. Yorkshire Water has come up over and over again. We're between 4 and 7 countries in the world out of 157 that water is not public ownership, and we're one of those. You keep saying that we need to work with Yorkshire Water. At what stage do we think that we need to work with Yorkshire Water rather than they thinking that they need to work with us? And something you said that organisations sometimes don't fit together. So my question is a simple one, that I'm looking at a national level of water ownership. The infrastructure has been always there. It was fit for purpose maybe 50 years ago. It hasn't been fit for purpose for the last 5 decades. So these companies have not invested at all. Today, you've said that Yorkshire Water is going to invest in Leeds. I hope they will, because it's my city and I love it. But up and down the country, that's not the same picture. So my question is simple from a scrutiny member's point of view is public ownership what we're looking here? Because they've not invested this, and they should have invested a long time ago.
I'm gonna it's obviously a somewhat political question, so I'm gonna bring in Councillor Carlisle to start with there, if that's okay.
I mean, I can come in. I think what members of the team will be able to update further is how we've worked with Yorkshire Water. I think it's probably not appropriate for them necessarily to say whether they're in favour of public ownership of the water network or otherwise. Something we can discuss if we want to follow at somewhere like council or something like that. What's really interesting about this, and we were talking about the surface water flooding before, what you see as ward members that's really interesting is going into areas you've never been to before, where somebody is telling you that something must have changed because the last 3 years their house has been flooded by surface water. And when you look at that, the only things that can have changed over that time, and I've been out several times with members of the flood risk team who are really diligent in the work they do and probably go beyond what they should do in trying to find what's causing this flooding issue. Sometimes it purely is that the world has got wetter in terms of an increase in storms and events. Sometimes it's just that assets haven't been looked after, and that's where we need to challenge whoever owns that, whether it be our own highways, gullies, and we need to make sure we're looking after those, or whether it be something that Yorkshire Water own. What I will say is sometimes we probably find ourselves doing Yorkshire Water's homework, and we'll know as ward members sometimes you get issues that are batted between the two, that they will say it's not necessarily them. Our team do go out, and I'd say in a lot of councils probably we wouldn't go out if we thought it was a water company's issue, but we do go out anyway because that resident needs an answer. But sometimes we find it batting back and forth because we're sure it may be something that they need to do. They do work with us when we get there, and when we're all there and when we work together, it all works out. But sometimes it's just hard joining that up. So I think that partnership really works well. I don't know if there's anything further members of the team want to say about how we're working together with them. As I say, I'm not sure whether they've got, they can keep their own thoughts and they're welcome to their own thoughts about how it should be managed overall, but probably not appropriate for this.
I will just quickly add, yeah, I will, if it's okay, I won't comment on that. The thing I suppose I would say is that there is a lot of work to look at Thames Water and whether that would be a public ownership model. And so I suppose, as always, we look around the country, there might be things that we learn from how that works and whether they see changes and a different approach. The other thing that happened in the last couple of years is that there was a comprehensive review of the water industry by Sir John Cunliffe, and that report has been published. And there were lots of recommendations that came from that. One of them was around regional coordination and regional bodies. We haven't seen a change in the way that that's done in Yorkshire yet. So I think what we have been doing with Yorkshire Water and the Environment Agency is working with them to understand what they think the changes are as a result of the recommendations that Cunliffe report did. I think that could change the way that water's managed, and that might help to go away from flood risk management on one side and water resources and pollution managed separately. It might see more integration around that, and there's lots of discussion at the moment around whether West Yorkshire needs an integrated approach to water management. Again, we are part of those discussions, and I think just picking up on Councillor Carlisle's points, we do have lots of incidents where we do attend and we do look at it because going back to Councillor Walker's point, the residents aren't interested in where that water came from, quite rightly, they're just affected by it. So our stance, and there's always a balance around the resources that we've got and the time that we've got available, but the approach we tend to take is that we look at all of it, because invariably there's probably more than one organisation involved in most flooding incidents, and there's a mixture of assets. And the best thing we feel that we can do for those affected residents or those businesses is to be that facilitator and that mediator, so that we do try and make sure that we find out in the end who needs to be taking some actions. And we don't think the residents should have to do that back and forth. We feel like we've got a role to play in that. So there is a balance in terms of our time, but we feel that's probably the right approach at the moment, because it is quite a complicated setup.
Okay, thank you very much. I've indication from Councillor Martin to speak. Anybody else? No.
No, thank you. So my question also spans flooding, pollution and housing. And in my ward, Roundhay, I get incredibly frustrated by Yorkshire Water being quick to blame misconnections for the pollution of Gledow Beck. And rather than the overflow of sewerage into the Beck, which I think has got, much worse consequences. But can I check what we are doing to stop misconnections being an issue in new builds across the city?
I think there's a challenge around, I think the scrutiny that we provide on planning applications for there to be appropriate management of surface water and foul water is really good. I think the challenge that we have is that the implementation of those plans when it comes to construction, or when it comes to homeowners taking responsibility for their own assets and making changes, that's a real challenge. So I think we're seeing a growing interest in citizen science and people gathering their own data. I think that's really helpful, because it's hard to have eyes on every part of the city. But I think where people are seeing those problems, I think we'd struggle through sort of new development alone to think that people then wouldn't make changes retrospectively, whether that's actually through the delivery of the scheme itself. But obviously there's a role for building control to play in that. But we do see a lot of misconnections just through people taking their own actions. I think there's an education piece to do with contractors and people that are doing extensions and people that are doing sort of smaller works on people's homes. But a lot of the time, people are making their own changes, and I think we do need wherever we can, if people have got their eyes on their local area and they can flag that to us, we can work with Yorkshire Water and Environment Agency. We have brought a group together around sort of Gledhow Valley, and I think that's really been helpful because it's sort of shone a light on some of the things that are happening there and helping us to sort of look at how we work together as 3 organisations to do a little bit more around that. So yeah, I think it's hard to stop misconnections happening because I think it's residents and homeowners in particular that take some of those actions, whether well-meaning or not, but we do see that happening quite a lot.
Any other members wish to ask a question? I think it's been really interesting. We've had a real theme about surface water and working with Yorkshire Water and so on. I just have one additional kind of question around that. I guess it's been a couple of weeks since I read the strategy, so apologies if this is covered in it. But I'd like to know a bit more about how you collaborate with highways, actually, in particular. And I'm sure we've all got roads where there's kind of regular surface water flooding, which may not actually be like really, really bad, but does make an impact on the quality of a road and on pedestrians being able to get through and so on. So it's kind of, my suspicion is that sometimes these things are not a top priority for highways and not a top priority for your team probably, and that sometimes they need re-engineering to solve the problem. So, but perhaps the combined priority might push it up higher. So I'd just like to understand more about how you prioritize with highways. And related to that, I guess, in terms of surface water flooding in areas where the housing's been there for a long time, so you can't really make a difference through planning policy. What's your budget for tackling that? Is there a budget, or is it about applying for funding? How do you prioritize and deal with that? Is there a plan to over time tackle all of those areas, or is it kind of a bit more ad hoc than that?
Mark may be able to add to this as well, but so we've again in the background we've increasingly work with highways colleagues. So we have a group called the Surface Water Action Group, which is a sort of cross highways and transportation group. There is a budget allocated. It varies a little bit each year, but there is a budget allocated that's owned by Highways Asset Management, but purely put aside for works that we do collectively. There's actually a scheme on site started today in Pudsey, which is quite a large scheme to relay a culverted highway system, but that has been flooding in places. But it's just over the years, service connections have been made across by other utility providers, or we've struggled to provide the maintenance that's needed. So that's quite a comprehensive piece of work. But it's a good example of the highways teams and the flood risk teams have come together, looked at where we've got issues, where we're seeing regular issues, investigated it, found out which assets were maybe in need of repair, and then we put a sort of business case together for that funding. We can also get external funding through West Yorkshire Combined Authority and principally the Environment Agency for surface water schemes that would look at, instead of a brand new flood risk scheme that manages flooding from rivers, we'd actually more specifically look at working with highways colleagues to look at separating some of the highway drainage from going into the combined systems that Yorkshire Water manage, or creating storage areas. We've done some really good examples of that in Garforth in the last few years, where we've worked together to sort of utilise public open spaces as temporary flood storage areas. But that means that water's held away from the highway or away from the homes. And the Meanwood flood alleviation scheme is probably our best example of we're taking a sort of multi-pronged approach. So we're going to look at property flood resilience measures, so measures that are actually implemented on people's homes, like flood barriers and doors, because in some places we can't stop flooding happening for those properties, but we can try and reduce the impact. Alongside that, we will do natural flood management in the Meanwood catchment. So again, we will look at tree planting, storage, wetland areas to try and reduce the runoff. And then the third element to that is a surface water scheme. So we've already done combined mapping with Yorkshire Water, and we've looked at where we think we can make interventions that would reduce impacts. And some of those interventions will be on the highway. So again, we will work closely with colleagues in highways to sort of look at how we manage assets in a way that suits both purposes. The maintenance of sort of on highways, SUDs and blue-green infrastructure is a really tricky thing to manage across the country. There's some real different approaches. The water company has a role in that as well. So I think that would be a really interesting part of the city to look at, because I think we could do a lot with the what's planned there. But that will, by and large, that will be externally funded. It'll be grant funded. There may be ways to take a sort of combined approach that does look at, can we do more community level SUDs that could be paid for by and supported through new development, but possibly not leaving each developer to solve the problem themselves. Look at how we do that more collectively. We did a brilliant scheme in Killingbeck a few years ago. That's a good example of where we had 13 brownfield land housing sites that were struggling to sort of meet the requirements for their surface water management. So we actually worked with the developers and colleagues in asset management and regen, and looked at strategically putting all that water together in the system, but making space for it in Killingbeck Meadows. So I think we're keen to sort of look at options like that as well, where we sort of try and collectively facilitate the right sort of development in the right places, but provide that support for surface water management, so we're seeing betterment rather than just managing the issue.
I was just going to make the comment that just for the avoidance of any doubt, flood risk management actually are within highways and transportation. So they obviously, Jonathan and senior managers attend my SMTs, extended management team. So there's good liaison across both services, just for the avoidance of any doubt.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Doubt avoided. I have one related question. This is the most local councillor question of all time, but verges are so we have lots of green verges around the city. We're often told that they have a real value in terms of sustainable urban drainage. So I guess my question is, you talked there about kind of local, maybe even community action around this. Is there more that we can actually make of verges? Like, as a layperson, I look at them just as a bank of grass, and I think it could, by planting them more, for example, would that make more of a difference? When very often there's a portion of residents who would like to strip out those verges to create more parking, particularly in estates that were built a long time ago where there's just not enough parking. And the answer that comes back, which is a reasonable one, is, well, these are really important for climate resilience, but a lot of people would look at that and say, well, it's just quite a small patch of grass. How can that be truly important in that case? So I'd love to hear your views on kind of how useful they are. Does that blanket approach make sense, and can we make more use out of those little spaces around the city?
I think any area of permeable surfacing is valuable as a starting off point, and every little bit that we lose, we need to understand it could make the situation worse. As a grass verge, there's still a benefit there, and if we were to do anything else with it in terms of formalizing it in terms of like a SUD, sustainable drainage, we just need to remember that, as Jonathan was saying, about maintenance with that. So we can always enhance green spaces for flood protection purposes, but we just need to take into account the full life cycle of that and who is going to assume responsibility. Whereas with grass verges generally, other than the actual grass cutting, they're doing the benefits without too much more. So we just need to kind of make sure we're going into these aspects with our eyes wide open. I think from a point of view of people using these spaces for other purposes, such as parking, I believe we shouldn't try to be too divisive on this. So I think we can work with others to make sure that we get what we need from a flood alleviation point of view, and others get what they need for their kind of general use, so to speak. So by that I mean, okay, create a parking space if needs be, but can the surfacing be permeable so it's not causing issues elsewhere? Obviously, it's a case by case basis, and we can't just apply that logic everywhere, but in certain circumstances, there clearly will be opportunity to work with people on what they're trying to achieve as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, please.
Just to add to what Mark said, there's an emerging piece of work. Again, it's connected to the Meanwood work that we're doing, but there's a blue and green demonstrator project that's been funded through local levy funding from the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, and the principle that they're pushing is around the rain chain. So they've brought together some sort of community focused engagement tools, really trying to engage people in the sort of principle of the water, like the mini water cycle, as it moves through their properties or on their streets. So I suppose to build on what Mark said, lots of people do pave their front driveways. Lots of people maybe don't have a rainwater harvesting or water boat, or there are lots of little things that might seem like they're not going to solve problems like on the scale we saw in 2015, but they will help. And I think we need to think of different ways to sort of try and engage communities. So the plan is to do a lot more at Meanwood Valley Urban Farm, and as a place that lots of school kids go to, lots of community groups go to. Obviously, we're keen to work with lots of groups around the city, but that could provide a really good place to sort of engage people in the principles of the difference between can that function in a certain way, and can it do something positive from a water perspective. And that's really it's quite new, that work, but it does seem like it's getting a lot of traction, and I think it'll be a really positive way for us to try and engage people in the principle of why that area might be used in a certain way. So whether that's a grass verge or someone's front garden.
Thank you. Yeah, in fact, I was at the Meanwood Valley Farm summer fair the other day, and I was on the tombola stand helping out, and bumped into Vanessa, who showed me around all of that kind of demonstrator work and the various tools and things, and I learned a lot. And the kids certainly look like they're having fun. So yeah, I think you made a big impact that day. So thank you and well done. And please pass on my thanks to the team. So any other questions or comments from the board before we move on? We've got Councillor Dye.
Hi, just a quick one really. Just thinking about the fact that we have had quite a lot of people interested in surface water flooding. So I was just wondering, when you come back to our next meeting later in the year, on page 110, you've got a heat map, and it says it's dated 2022. I just wondered if there's anything more up to date. I don't know. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but it might be a good follow on in terms of looking at the work that's been done and being able to judge its impact really.
Yeah, we gather different data sets all the time, so we can maybe just include a little bit more of a sort of showcase of some of the different data sets that we've got. We do a lot of data sharing with the Environment Agency and Yorkshire Water as well. So we maybe that's just a useful image that we've got from 2022, but we have bang up to date records, so we can do a little bit more with that.
Yeah, thank you. That would be good. Okay, anybody else? If not, Councillor Carlisle, do you have any closing remarks you would like to make as exec member?
Thank you. I mean, it's good to take a good look at this. Obviously, the last strategy was developed in 2018, and so every year the climate impacts become clearer to us, often in very different ways, but that allows us to create a better strategy out of it. Obviously, the concerns about surface water flooding, that's a really good one for us to take and look at. I mean, obviously, we've got those existing properties, but as a fast growing city, the work the team does ensuring that we're not building in vulnerability with new development, and in a way we're facilitating development in appropriate areas as well by some of the work we do, is a really important thing. Overall, I thank members helpful comments, and they're really positive comments about the team. They're a really valuable asset to highways and transportation as a service, but also to the whole council because of that data they provide to other departments, which is really valuable. So it's a really good team that we have there, really good attitude of working together to help the council out as a whole, which I think if every service had that attitude with across the entire council, then we'd be doing very well. Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, I should have asked Angela as director, would you like to make any closing comments? Or
No, I had nothing to add. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you very, very much. And certainly echo Councillor Carlisle's comments, positive comments there as well about the team. Appreciate your time. So just as a board, are we happy that we've reviewed and scrutinised the draft strategy? And please note that the consultation will be held and the outcome will be reported to Exec Board. And our comments also will go to Exec Board for them to note. So yeah, are we happy with that as a board? Yeah. Brilliant. Before the next item, I'm going to suggest a 5-minute comfort break. So please return here in 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Right. Welcome back, everybody. We are on agenda item number 12. This is on the local plan consultation, which is really important to our board and to the whole of Leeds. And we will have a local plan a couple of times this year. So thank you for joining us. And believe we'll start with a brief presentation from officers.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a video, but we've got a presentation. So yeah, I'm conscious, it's slightly new board, obviously new chair and some new members as well. So I just thought it might be useful just to take a bit of a step back in terms of what the local plan is, why we do it, and hopefully that's of use. For those of you who are familiar, hopefully it's still a useful refresher. The Leeds local plan. We're required by law to produce a local plan, and this version of it is a new consolidated version, which aims to bring a lot of documents together that already exist. So you might be familiar with the core strategy, site allocations plan, the unitary development plan, the natural resources and waste plan. All of these are local plan documents that we're hoping to bring together to make them up to date into one Leeds local plan, which will look from essentially now to 2043 as they're required to plan for a 15-year period. And as I say, it's aimed to be a bit more streamlined, up to date, replace a lot of pages with hopefully a smaller, easily to accessible digital version as well. It's going to shape where new homes go, where new employment is developed, but it's not just about homes and employment. There's a lot of other topics that it covers, much needed infrastructure, things like minerals, waste, green spaces and things like that. So it's a very broad plan that covers a lot of different land uses. Its real aim is to try and provide certainty and predictability about what's going to happen in our city across the next 15 years by being quite clear about what land should be used for, and when it is developed, what it should look like, the standards that it's built to. It reduces the risks of speculative and unplanned development, and hopefully that's of benefit to the city as a whole. It's also in strong alignment with a whole host of council strategies and priorities, and helps deliver those things, not least the city ambitions, but also general aspirations in terms of inclusive and economic growth, but also our alignment with spatial priorities like mass transit and the South Bank Newtown and wider infrastructure needs as well. I thought it was also useful just to sort of talk about the process that we're in, because I think it is complex, and I think it's worth just trying to take ourselves through it a little bit step by step. We've moved to a new plan making system because nationally we've moved to a new plan making system. So the government introduced new regulations March this year. They had mentioned it and it'd been laid out in law earlier, but the actual practical regulations only came out this March. Some members who are more familiar with the local plan process will know that we've held local plan consultations twice in 2023 and 2025. They were under the old system that we were using nationally. There are no transitional arrangements, so therefore, for us to continue, we need to move to the new plan making system. So formally, that means restarting the plan process with that new planning system. But in reality, a lot of work that we've done up until now is all incredibly useful and helpful in terms of making the local plan. And a lot of the responses that we received previously, which we got something like 40,000 comments last year, that doesn't just get thrown in the bin. That all helps to shape and influence the local plan moving forward. So just to kind of reassure Scrutiny members, but also the public at large, none of that is wasted just because we've moved to a new mechanism. There are some real benefits of the new system as well. I'm happy to go into this further if members wish, but what it introduces is a gateway system, which will be held by, we understand, a planning inspector. So there'll be 3 of those. The first one's an internal one we do ourselves, but the second 2 are essentially carried out by an inspector, but before we get to an examination. So it means that if we're slightly off track with aspects of the plan, we'll be told by the relevant person well in advance and be able to make amendments. Or if we're told that actually you're right on track, everything's going as planned, then we can get that reassurance that when we go to examination that we're doing the right things. So we're quite supportive of that new system. We think it should help ease our way through the process. It also means that if we're doing it through the new planning system, we're in accordance with the new National Planning Policy Framework, which, as I said earlier, we think might even come out today. But hopefully this side of the parliamentary recess. If not, it'll be in the autumn. And that means that we're in accordance with the most up-to-date planning policy, rather than if we'd have stayed with the old system, we have a bizarre situation where we have to be in accordance with the previous version of the National Planning Policy Framework, not the most up-to-date one, which I think in decision-making terms makes things just too complex. So yeah, it sets out a 30-month expectation of when we to complete the plan, and that 30-month time essentially starts this autumn. And yeah, we work our way to hopefully adoption in spring 2029. So this diagram kind of shows us where we are in that process, and hopefully you can see at the bottom the gateway sort of phases that I mentioned. We're at the first stage of, if you see the sort of slightly paler blue boxes, they're the stages of consultation. We're at that very first one in terms of the new system. And this winter, we'll hopefully be at the plan content and evidence stage. And for the scoping consultation, which we'll go into in a little bit, but it's really two questions. What should the plan contain? And how would you like us to engage with you? They're the two questions that we ask as part of this stage. So it's nothing about sites. It's nothing about detailed policies. It's quite a simple, almost technical consultation about those two things. The details about things like sites and policies, that will come this winter. So what have we done right now? Well, last month, having gone to executive board, we were able to publish our notification of intention to commence plan making, which is essentially the official starting gun of the process. We also put online our local plan timetable, which we're now required to do. And the scoping consultation that we're here today to talk about began on the 24th of June and runs for 6 weeks until, sorry, make sure that mic's, runs for 6 weeks until the 5th of August. And so, you know, what is it asking? Well, as I say, it's those two questions really. Is the scope of the consultation right? Are we covering the topics that people believe we should be covering? And on the next slide, I'll show what those topics are. But also, how would you like to be engaged in the plan moving forward? What's the best way of kind of contacting you, of getting your comments and seeing information? And as I say, it doesn't revisit policy information. It doesn't revisit things about site options. That will come later in this winter, which will also be brought to this scrutiny board. So I'm not going to kind of read this out. It's obviously in your papers, but this is the draft scope in its entirety. So as you can see, it's quite high level. It's pretty simple, I hope. And just to pull out some aspects that have already been covered today, we've obviously got flood risk in there, you know, planning to avoid, reduce and mitigate the risks of floods, resilience as well, which is really the climate focused one, making sure we're creating resilient places, making best use of energy efficiency, energy security, and responding to shocks associated with global climate change, and doing everything we can to reduce carbon emissions as well. But obviously there's also a whole host of other things in there about delivery of housing, making sure we're sustainable in terms of transport connectivity, but also our town centres, minerals and waste, and all those other topics as well. So that's the scope in its entirety, and that's what we're asking comments on. Do you agree with that? Would you add anything? Would you take anything away? So yeah, what we're asking of people, I guess, is just as I said, you know, do you agree with that scope? We're asking people not to submit information on sites. We've got so much information we got from people last year. That's all still in the bank, and we'll do a further consultation this winter on that, as I say. And just to reaffirm, each stage of consultation will be coming to this scrutiny board as well. I just want to end with just kind of where we are. So that's a link to the website. We've received 600, you know, circa 600 completed comments already. Which I think for a consultation of this nature is pretty good. 6,000 visitors to our website, which suggests quite a decent conversion rate, really, and about 36,000 views on social media, with excellent support from our communications team, who've been helping us every step of the way through this. So yeah, that was the end of the presentation, Chair. So happy to take obviously comments and questions.
Thank you. That is really helpful. If you could just turn your mic off when you're not speaking as well, sorry. Good to remind people at the end there where we are in the process and what we should be focusing on today. So any members got any questions or comments? I've got Councillor Buckley to begin with. So Councillor Buckley, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, page 201, transport and connectivity, which was referenced in your presentation just then. I just wondered, as regards mass transit, what questions or what comments are they invited to give? For example, I think that if you took a poll of Leeds residents now, they would all think, or some would think, that this is going to be a Leeds transport scheme. Well, of course, it's not, is it? It's going to be Leeds to Bradford and that kind of thing. I think people still think they'll be able to go from Crossgates to Horsforth and that sort of thing, which is not going to happen. So what kind of questions are they invited to ask or comments? And are people informed about the costs of it? For instance, we were going to be asked to pay a workplace parking levy, weren't we? Is that relevant? Are they aware of that?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. So in terms of the latter, no, that's not relevant. It's not a planning consultation. And likewise, mass transit has its own process in terms of consultations. So there is what's called Caroline can talk about it in a bit more detail, but a development framework that's being produced for mass transit in conjunction with all 5 local authorities that are responsible for that, which is being kind of steered by WICA. So whilst mass transit is clearly relevant to the local plan, this consultation isn't about mass transit. And really what we're trying to do here in terms of this consultation is just show that we recognise that transit and transportation as a broad term is highly relevant to where growth goes and doesn't go. But we're not consulting on specific schemes such as mass transit because they are subject to their own processes, which are being controlled through other mechanisms. So this is not a consultation on mass transit.
Just to add to that, as Adam referred to, so there is a strategic development framework, which is a planning document being developed jointly by the 5 West Yorkshire authorities and WICA on mass transit, and looking at bringing in some sort of high-level planning policies on mass transit, and that will be coming to this scrutiny board next time in September. So looking to do a public consultation on that over the summer. There's a joint committee of the Yorkshire authorities later this month, and assuming that gets that go ahead at that committee, then the next meeting of the scrutiny board will be looking at that. But again, it's sort of high level policies at this stage, because I think the mass transit scheme itself has a separate approval process to go to, but we need to make sure that the Leeds local plan and planning generally across West Yorkshire takes into account what that means and aligns that with sort of future plans for housing, but and for other types of growth, but sort of being mindful of where we are in that process, and that mass transit hasn't been, we don't know exactly where the routes are going to be, the form it's going to take, exactly what impact it's going to have. So I think it's going to be a staged approach to that through this local plan and probably future updates as well.
Thank you, that's helpful. Any other questions or comments at this stage from members? Yes, Councillor Walker, and then I have a couple as well.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is the right point to be mentioning this, but in terms of accessibility of planning documents and plain English, and residents whose first language isn't English, and just from a range of accessibility needs, it would be good to find out what's being done to help with the consultation process from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, that's highly relevant because in a sense the purpose of this consultation is about how we consult, and what we'll be asking and what we are asking will then influence us producing an engagement strategy and that will then determine how we engage on the plan as it gets a bit more, I suppose, impactful to local people when they can start to see the sites and they can start to see the policies. So yeah, no, that is highly relevant. And yeah, we work really closely with our communications colleagues to try and make sure that our information is presented in as plain English a way as possible. It can be a challenge because, as you can appreciate, planning is a technical discipline and there's a lot of information that we need to make sure is available. But we've done a lot of work over the last sort of 5 or 6 years to make sure that we give all respondents lots of different routes in. You know, if you've only got a couple of minutes, you should read this. If if we try and show sort of videos which really boil things down, try and make our material as graphically interesting as possible. We've also make sure that we go to a variety of different groups as well. We were at the Deaf Forum a couple of years ago. We go to a range of different kind of accessibility groups, and it's always incredibly useful and quite humbling, I think, to hear the kind of lived experiences, but the way that we might have traditionally presented material is a barrier to a lot of people engaging with it. So yeah, we do have a commitment to that, to make sure that we do, and yes, we are able to use the council's translation services to try and present information in a variety of different languages on request, which yeah is important clearly to make sure that we're receiving a variety of comments from a representative element of Leeds, and not just people who are able to give the time to access the material. So yeah, that is highly relevant. And what we ask as part of the consultation is a kind of a tick box multiple choice. You know, how would you like to see information presented? But then an opportunity below to then add in where you would like us to see, say, go further, or perhaps techniques we use which you don't think is particularly helpful or relevant. So yeah, that question is highly relevant to this consultation, absolutely. And I think if you've got any ideas about where we could go further, or always keen to learn from either different departments or different authorities that are doing things in a slightly different way, that are getting a great response rate as a result, we'd love to hear about that and see if there's something that we can do in Leeds similarly.
Yeah, just in the interest of full transparency, my background is in comms and I work in filmmaking and photography, so it's been great to see videos being shown today. It would be great to get copies of slides and a link to the video as well. I thought that was great. So yeah, great to hear from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take this opportunity to ask some questions myself then. So I'll just start with around communications and that side of things. So I guess for all of us, we have at least one site in our, I would guess that most people who responded to previous local plan consultation responded around sites specifically. And that probably all of us have at least one site that attracted lots of comment. And one of the things that happens around the local plan process is a lot of uncertainty, because it is really complicated and people think that there's a planning application to build homes on a particular site or whatever. And as ward members, we have to spend quite a lot of time helping explain this process and to a degree reassuring people. But so in terms of how we communicate this, how are we going to make sure that people who, because you've made it clear that when people responded previously, those comments have been banked and they will be used. But how do we give people confidence that that is the case? How are we going to communicate to previous respondents that we have taken into account their comments and give them clarity around that? I guess bearing in mind that a lot of them might not necessarily even know that they were specifically commenting on the local plan. A lot of them will have felt that they were commenting on a site or a planning application. So I think that's a big challenge for you, to be honest, because this is really complicated. So I would love to hear how you can do that. If you don't mind, could I just ask a couple more questions, if that's okay, on that? So you've also got the timeline with the gateways and so on. Is there a way we could create perhaps some more plain English kind of timeline for people. Gateway 1 doesn't tell you a lot. That might not be what we're saying to the public, but just want to make sure that people can look at it and get a better grasp of what's going on. I include myself in that group of people. And actually, I'll start. I've got a couple more questions, but I'll start with those if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. You're absolutely right. It is really complicated, and I think when you're dealing with the volume of sites that we're looking at, it is hard to communicate clear messages. And you're right. I think we try really hard to almost curate that what kind of marketing people would call the customer journey. And sometimes that can get subverted if you go straight in via, say, social media, and you don't see some of the material that we've tried to kind of explain and show what this consultation is about, what it is and what it isn't. So I think we're learning lessons all the time in terms of how people, a planner might look at something in one way, but how lots of different people would look at it can be very different. So I think we're learning more about that customer journey all the time. And I think how we present information on the sites is going to be crucial. I think what happened previously with the last consultation, you're absolutely right about sites being the main driver of responses. I think something like 95% of responses was about sites. So clearly, that is what a lot of people are interested in who respond, the vast majority. I think perhaps we may have given the impression, we may have scared a few people, I think, when they looked at the maps last time round and they saw a huge amount of sites. And I think for those people who are not perhaps as well versed in looking at local plan maps, and why should they be, they might have thought every single one of these sites was coming forward. And I think that caused quite a lot of angst. And I know when we were at public events, you felt that quite viscerally with people, that sort of fear, and through conversation you were able to calm people down and explain, no, that's not what this is simply a reflection of every single site that's been put to us. I think once people understood that, I think that helped those conversations. So I think how we communicate that is obviously going to be really crucial, that this isn't a series of proposals at this stage of consultation in the winter. It will be essentially about how we're scoring sites, or at least how we're showing them, and probably we're still working through the detail. I think it's important to say, but what we're anticipating is perhaps a red, amber, green system to try and show what our thoughts are, having assessed these sites and having understood what people have told us about sites. This is how they're looking, and then people can respond to us in kind about, well, you're showing this as a red site because you don't think it's going to come forward. I actually think you should bring this forward, or vice versa. I support the fact that you've covered this as a red site. I don't want to see this site come forward. So I think what people will see as well through this consultation in the winter is there's more sites that are being consulted on, because we had a call for sites exercise last time round. So there's probably about 150, 200 additional sites that people won't have seen. So it's important, obviously, that they get an opportunity to see that and comment on those sites too, in the same way that they did last time round. So yeah, I agree with you, and we will work through really closely with our comms team to make sure that our messages are as clear and as obvious as they can be, and being clear about what we're looking for from people. And you make the point about how people's previous comments have been used. We'll have a report of consultation which will kind of be going through, what you said and how that's reflected. So hopefully that will be quite clear to people. In terms of the stages of plan making and how plain English that is, I agree. We can certainly look at that. I suppose what we need to be clear with is this is a national system, and we're using national terminology. I agree. Words like scoping, they don't mean an awful lot to me, to be honest. So they're not going to mean an awful lot to local people. And if we say things like plan, content, and evidence, again, that's probably, that probably needs to be run through a bit of a plain English checker, doesn't it, to sort of know that people really know what this is and what it isn't. So we can definitely look at that, and I see no reason why we couldn't put our own spin, I suppose, on what these stages are, and what they mean to you, essentially, which I think is perhaps what you're saying there, that you could look at some of those stages and not, what does gateway 2 mean to me, right? It doesn't mean a lot, does it? So I think we can definitely do that, and just perhaps put a bit of a plain English approach to, this is the official terminology, this is what it really means, I think would be probably quite helpful.
I think so, and I don't underestimate how challenging that's going to be. Frankly, that it is really complex and it's difficult, and you know, you will never get 100% successful communication, but the more we can do, the better, I think, with this. So just a couple more quick ones, if that's okay. So just on the actual question of how the kind of options people have got around how we communicate with them. I think one that's potentially missing would be around sort of text / WhatsApp. So I'm just thinking about when you hear about people interacting with us online, usually it's talked about in terms of people's ability to go online, and that's part of it. But actually, for a lot of people, it's just that they don't have a laptop or a computer. They may have a smartphone. But yeah, so I'm wondering whether there's something we can do around that, or whether it's worth asking people if that's a way that they like to be communicated with and communicate, even if it comes down to requesting more information, or for example, if they can't get online to read the local plan and they can ask a question around text, we can then let them know, or you could actually pop to your local library to pick one up, or whatever. So is it worth asking a question around that on the consultation? Is that something that's been looked at?
I think in terms of sort of things like text and WhatsApp, we can definitely look into that. I'm not aware that we've looked into that, but we can definitely take that away as, you know, an official comment from, you know, Scrutiny board, that this is something that you would like us to look at, and see if that's a way that we can notify people. We would, as I understand it, I guess we would need almost like a mobile phone number to be able to do that. But if I may, we'll take that away, Chair, because I think that's something definitely worth us investigating. In terms of access by mobile phone, though, the material on our commonplace platform is designed so it can be accessed by phone. So a lot of people are using that to look at the maps, to make comments. So you don't need a laptop to be able to make representations. It is designed to be mobile friendly. We put a lot of work in with the team to make sure that is the case. So if you only have a phone, that's absolutely fine. I guess there's always that slight, there is a difficulty of, you know, with a very large consultation, you could have thousands of pages of information. It's always going to be a bit harder to read that on a phone, isn't it? But I think that puts it on us to make sure that the material we're putting out there is not just literally available on a phone, but is also practically available on a phone. You can actually read it and would want to. So yeah, we do work really hard to make sure that it is usable on the phone. But yeah, on that point about the text or WhatsApp notifications, yeah, we'll absolutely take that away.
Yeah, I guess it's just sort of it may not be possible, but it's worth thinking about. I think it's I think vast majority of people are very used to using text and WhatsApp, and it could be a useful way of communicating, and maybe in particular helping people get to that bit of information that they are particularly interested in. So if they have a question about a particular site and you can direct them to that via text, and they can open that on their phone. One last question, sorry, about scoping. I think probably one of the big areas of interest for people in planning is around, well, there are probably two. One is the airport, Leeds Bradford Airport, and the other is like data centres becoming a very hot topic. So I just want to clarify, when we're asking people, is the scope of this consultation right? Where would those two things sit? Is the airport treated as basically just another business, or does it kind of come under transport? And same with data centers, is that under like resilience maybe? I'm not sure. And I suspect members of the public might have questions about that, so it would be good to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, absolutely. They are great examples, I think, of topics that people can kind of write in that they would like to see clarity that the local plan is covering those two issues. As it is, yes, they're both covered already in terms of the transportation section would be covering the airport. At the moment, data centres, we don't have any policies on data centres, which is really why it's important that we do have policies in the new local plan about it. So that would fall under the kind of economic development and industrial development policies. But it'd be great for people to write in and say, and we can obviously reflect it back as an official response to Scrutiny Board, that you wish for just clarity that those two topics are definitely going to be covered by the local plan. Obviously, I can give you that reassurance now that they are, but it's helpful to have that officially noted. So yeah, they will very much be covered. And yeah, the details of what the policies are going to say on both of those, I think we need to work that through over the next few months in terms of what detail we'll be able to consult on in the winter, because there's a lot of policy topics to cover, and the national planning policy framework is going to influence that quite a lot in terms of what a local plan can and can't do. But yes, I think we would hope to be able to consult on kind of our preferred kind of policy approaches for both of those important issues.
Thank you. Do any other members have any questions or comments? Okay, lovely. Would Angela Barnacle as Director or Councillor Carlo like to add any further comments?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. The only thing that I would reiterate is, because I know that people spent a lot of time communicating with us in the last 18 months, is to rest assured that everything that has been submitted has not been lost. So all those community committees, all the events that we did, every time somebody responded to the call for sites, we have that, and we will still be reviewing that, and we will come back later in the municipal year. So please rest assured that anybody's investment to date has not been wasted, and we will certainly act on it. Thank you.
The only last comment I'll add is one that I added in strategic planning panel as well. This is, as you said, Chair, incredibly complex language in a lot of this. There's a lot of quite complex data in some of those assessments of sites and such. I think it's beholden on us as members, I'll say, as openly and hopefully as honestly as I can, to explain that very well to our residents as well. I think last time we went out with the consultation, trying not to verge into the too political, I guess, but members described it in a lot of different ways. Not all of them were exactly the same as it had been described to them in the email from officers. So, there were people saying that sites were going to be built on, that all of those sites were going to be built on. That is completely inappropriate to let residents know that. There were posts I saw going out saying Leeds City Council are once again coming for your green belt. I mean, the post I put out said that the assessment said that greenbelt sites wouldn't be built on as part of that assessment as well. So I think I would just ask members, there is a lot in here that residents will be concerned about around these sites. It's up to all of us to be as honest and transparent as we can about the process that we followed in getting here, the fact that they couldn't have been submitted by anyone, and we are beholden to assess those. And then the assessment, we're asking people's help in that as well. So unless we're saying to people, if you think we've done something wrong with this site, comment on our approach to the assessment. This is all obviously for the later assessment that's down the line, the later consultation. Then that's what we really need to hear from them. And if we're not explaining that to residents very clearly and carefully, then probably the answers that they're given aren't going to have the value that they could do. So yeah, that I guess is an appeal from me. And to second that, I mean, Angela said it very clearly. All those comments we've heard so far will be in there, but there are new sites that will be coming into the later consultation. But as well, there could be things that have come up in the last 2 years that weren't an issue previously when we did a scoping consultation. Is it 2 years? I can't remember. Thank you. Good. Feels longer sometimes. So people can absolutely add those to this, and we'll cover those. But yeah, we need to get through getting a plan so we don't allow speculative development to come through by not having a plan for where it should be.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there was an incredible amount of misinformation around this, I think, in the last round of consultation. So that's another challenge for you and your team, I guess, how to deal with that. And if there's anything we as members can do to support you with that, let us know. Please, not just the scrutiny board, but all 99 members of council have a responsibility towards this. Lovely. Well, thank you very much for your time. Are members happy to note the contents of a report and move on? Lovely. Thank you. In which case, we can just finish by noting the time and date of the next meeting. That's right. I haven't missed anything, have I? No. So our next meeting will be 10 a.m. on Monday, the 23rd of September. And we will have a pre-meeting from 9:30 as we did today. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Have a lovely day.